In Italy, the first trial against America's so-called extraordinary rendition program is coming to a close. 26 Americans and 7 Italians are accused of helping to kidnap a Muslim cleric and then move him to Egypt, where he was tortured. Well, a verdict is expected by the end of the year. Well, joining us now from our Washington studios to talk about this is RT's correspondent Priya Sridhar and her guest, the defence attorney Mark Zaid. Good to see you again, Priya. Now, it's a pretty historic case, isn't it?
Yes, it definitely is. I think a lot of people are interested to find out what's going to happen in this case. Now, many people say that this incident was part of a series of secret kidnappings that happened around the world after September 11th, 2001. And joining me to discuss the latest on this case is Mark Zaid, defense attorney for Sabrina D'Souza, one of the women who's being prosecuted in this case. Mark, thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So, first of all, I know that your client is denying any involvement in this kidnapping, and she says that everything that she did over in Italy was under direct orders from her superiors. So why then hasn't the government granted her immunity?
That's a very good question. We're not entirely sure. And what happened actually last week was an Air Force officer who has also been indicted, one of 26 Americans, was at least requested to be granted what was called SOFA, Status of Forces Agreement, immunity, as part of NATO, a very long-standing agreement that says if a military officer or individual is facing a crime in a NATO country, the host government can take that individual back for prosecution if desired or nothing. And in this case, what we have is Sabrina was a diplomat for the State Department, as a number of them were that have been indicted. And the U.S. government has failed or refused to invoke diplomatic or consular immunity. They've never said why.
So is the government making a distinction between military personnel and a worker for the State Department?
Apparently so at this time, and I say that's incredibly unusual. In the history of diplomatic immunity, this is something that is sacrosanct. And it has nothing to do necessarily with the United States, per se. This is a function of state action that every country has. Russia has, every country has diplomats abroad who are protected by certain immunities. And this is the type of action, not necessarily the specific in the sense of rendition, but when an individual with the diplomatic corps is indicted, they are usually given the opportunity to essentially be declared persona non grata and go home.
And I know that the Italian prosecutor said that the evidence of a kidnapping was indisputable. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I think from what we know, that appears to be the case. There were witnesses, and when you have someone standing on the street and a van pulls up and grabs the person screaming and throws them into a van, that would appear to be a kidnapping or a reality television show.
So you're not denying that it happened, but you're saying that your client wasn't involved?
Right. I mean, we don't know anything about that particular rendition. I mean, there have been people who have come forward. Robert Lady, who has given interviews, although he denies he had anything to do with the actual kidnapping. Sabrina was off skiing something like 100 kilometers away, and which, if somebody was involved with it, would they really be skiing with their family?
And are you worried at all that, this is the first case in the extraordinary renditions program and, your client's involved with it? Are you worried that maybe Italy is going to try to make a statement out of this?
Well, it's very interesting to find out what kind of statement Italy is going to make. I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with anyone being prosecuted for renditions. I mean, normally I would be on the other side of the fence, I think, in these cases. But there is something to be protective of with respect to diplomatic immunity. I mean, our diplomats need to have this type of protection. Now, it's hard to say exactly what might be motivating Italy. It clearly seems to be most likely that Italy was trying to make an internal political statement against the Berlusconi government because Italy, the prosecutors believe, Italians were involved. I think the Americans just got caught up into the net. And ironically, at the end of the day, it looks like all the Italians are going to be scot-free because of state secrets over in Italy, and the Americans are the ones who are going to end up being convicted.
And really quickly, what have been some of the challenges about, working on this case in absentia?
Well, for the longest time, until I got involved, Sabrina wasn't allowed to talk to her defense counsel. Now, and in fact, it was only this August that the U.S. government agreed to even pay for her defense counsel over in Italy. So for 3 years, this trial's been going on, and Sabrina has had no defense counsel that she's been working with. They've been working as a court-appointed attorney. So this case has been not only unusual on the Italian side, but unusual on the American side. And that's the scary message that it's sending, because if Americans aren't going to protect their diplomats, our government is not going to protect their diplomats, then I hope our diplomats are told that.
Well, it's an interesting and important case, and we'll certainly keep you updated on any developments that we hear from here in Washington, D.C. But for now, I'm going to throw it back to you in Moscow.
Many thanks to you, Priya. That was Priya Sridhar and her guest, defence attorney Mark Zaid, reporting from our Washington studio. Many thanks.